And welcome in. It is the Fantasy Basketball Podcast. It is Thursday, October 20th, and the season has begun. I think this is show 10 for us already, which is kind of crazy.
Oh, we're knee-deep in it right now.
We are very knee-deep. So with me, as always, Big Game James. James, how are we tonight?
Ahoy, I'm doing fantastic. The season is here. I'm in my happy place. I'm good.
You are in your happy place. I mean, we were just on right before the show, and you are like higher than a kite right now. Not literally, but just like ready to rock. Yeah, so is it just all the NBA that you're watching? It's just like the juices are flowing?
We're going to talk about it a little bit, but this is one of those seasons that you walk into and there's no clear-cut favorites. There's new faces. There's people who come back. I don't realize how much I love basketball until it's like upon me and I'm completely immersed in it. And damn, I love it so much. So I'm excited. It was a fantastic first couple nights. From a fantasy standpoint, you know, a lot of stuff we talked about were on point. We're going to circle back on that today and get us ready for next week. But all in all, great night.
Yeah, it's interesting. You know, I think that, look, and we've talked about this a bunch on other episodes, but we're going to make mistakes. I think we're going to have some home runs, and we're probably going to have some strikeouts too. But after the first couple nights, I'm feeling pretty good about our assessments going into the season. Feeling pretty good about that stuff. So before we start here, I do have a small bone to pick with you. Okay, so I took my youngest daughter, who's kind of an old soul, to the Elton John concert. It's like the final tour. And as James shakes his head, I can see him on the screen. You actually called Elton John a poor man's Billy Joel?
Yes.
Is that correct?
He's a poor man's Billy Joel. They're like De Niro and Pacino to me. Look, I don't hate on Elton John. I've never
hate no. You hate on Elton John by saying he's a poor man's Billy Joel.
Okay, so I'm glad that you brought that up, because what I would like to do is I'd like to go back to the tape and I'd like to refer to our text exchange after you told me that you were at the Elton John concert. And I'm going to quote, okay? So you stated that my daughter loves him, had the calendar marked for a year. Fair.
That's true. Yeah, no, my youngest daughter, she's 13 years old. She is a total old soul. I love it. She loves like old music. It's fantastic. We have such a great thing in common.
And it continues with, I'm probably going to start grabbing purses and wallets. No one here can catch me because I think I'm the only one without artificial parts. So when you said that, let me unquote. Sorry, in quote. That was my case closed because.
Okay, well, no. Now, if Billy Joel had the same concert do you really think that it's not going to be a bunch of octogenarians? I mean, it is not, and like I will tell you, like she was the youngest person there by a long shot.
I do have a
long
question.
shot, probably by about 30 years.
I do have a question. Is she a fan of Billy Joel or Elton John, or did she see the Elton John biopic with I can't remember what his name is. He's a good-looking kid who plays in the Kingsman movies. Did she see that?
Yeah,
Egger.
No, she has yet to watch that.
Oh, okay.
So yeah, so this is on an authentic Elton John enthusiast. I mean, we're heading up to the Tacoma Dome here, and yeah, she was. I mean, we were playing all the songs all the way up. So no, it was a good time. But yeah, the crowd was interesting to say the least. I saw the worst ever white guy dancer in history. I took a video of it, and I will hold on to that likely for the rest of my life. It was really fantastic.
How much smoke do you want this episode?
How much smoke?
Yeah, because I am going to ask you, are you going to go on a limb and say that Elton John is even in Billy Joel's league?
Oh, they're totally in the same league.
Oh, okay.
In
the interest of this episode continuing, I'm going to have to stop you right here.
You can't say that he's not at least a working man's Billy Joel. They're absolutely in the same league. If there was a draft, they'd be taken 101 and 102. They would in the piano player songwriter draft. But we'll move on. We'll move on. Everybody's here to listen to basketball talk, not Elton John, who is really, really good. Okay. Anyway, so new episodes every Thursday, and breaking news. I'm just going to say it, James. I'm going to say it, and then we're going to just be held on to it here. We're going to come at you twice a week now. It's been really fun to get through all these episodes, and realistically, tonight we're going to talk a little bit about what we've seen, but also what we're going to see in week 2. Fantasy enthusiasts right now, they're already looking ahead to week 2 and setting those lineups. So we want to cover that, but we also want to come at you, early in the week and give you guys a review of the previous week as well. So thanks to everybody out there who's listening and, subscribing and doing all that. I mean, it certainly has poured a lot of fuel on our fire, and we're loving it. I think it's great. It's been a fun time for sure. So we'll be coming at you twice a week now. So if you like what you hear, please leave a comment, give us a 5-star review. Certainly helps the show. Again, the more fuel we get, the more things that we can really, really add to our suite of products here. Speaking of, get out there and visit our website. It's thefantasybasketballpodcast.com. We're going to be adding stuff to that all year. So rankings, updates, links to social accounts, all that good stuff. And speaking of those, make sure you get out there to Twitter. Follow us at @the_FBpod. You can find the podcast on really anywhere you find your podcasts. Go out there and find it. And we're also going to be out there on YouTube a ton. So make sure that you get out there and follow us. So this week we're going to be talking about some news and notes for the week. We're going to cover the injury report as well. We're going to take a look at some team schedules. And then really also talk about who and what to watch. But let's really start where we need to start, and that's opening night. So some of the things that you saw, James, that kind of caught your eye on opening night.
So they said that it's the highest viewership in 5 years. I totally believe it. It was a great set of games to start. Philadelphia and Boston, I think we took away from that Philadelphia has not evolved offensively. And if they don't really, really soon, I could see Doc, hitting the road jack. But I tell you what, Harden lived up to his MVP hype from an offensive fantasy standpoint, from an actual on-court real basketball player. The guy is Swiss cheese defensively, and that's going to be a problem for Philadelphia all season. Boston, I was nervous on how, they were going to come out. They went through a lot with their coaching situation. They lose their starting center, and they came out and they put the foot to Philadelphia, and Jason Tatum is looking to just go full MacGruber and start ripping throats out. He looked fantastic. Jaylen Brown looked fantastic. Big nights for both of them. Move on later in the night, the nightcap, Golden State Warriors ring ceremony. All eyes were on Draymond Green. Previous, and I don't know how much time we're going to have to talk about this today, but I don't know if you had a chance to see Draymond Green's I don't know if he funded it or what, but he ran like a little 10-minute mini documentary post-punch. It was absolutely atrocious. I think it was horrible for his image, his brand, and everything. Showed no remorse whatsoever. But the game was a bigger it was a bigger spectacle in the fact that the Lakers are absolutely a dumpster fire. They have no shooting. Anthony Davis looked fantastic, both sides of the floor, defensively and offensively. But it's going to be a long season for the Lakers. But both games actually lived up to the hype, as far as I was concerned, with all the other aspects around it. Game 2 came at us with a lot of the new rookies, guys playing really, really well right out of the gate. Banchero, he's ready for this league. He came out, fantastic debut. And I'm telling you, you said earlier, some of the things we say aren't going to hit and some of the things that we say are going to hit. This New Orleans Pelicans team, this is my squad. They absolutely took it to Brooklyn in their first game, and I'm putting it on record right now. So what's today, the 20th? Zion Williamson will be MVP next season.
So a couple takeaways here. Number one, I'm really impressed that you know what day it is, because we've had that problem before on the show, and I'm never going to let it go. I am very impressed with that. Let's back up a little bit to that first night. More impressed with Boston or more disappointed in Philadelphia?
I'm not disappointed in Philadelphia. I thought Philadelphia is still going to be good. I still think they're a top 3 team in the East. My issue is they haven't evolved. Tyrese Maxey looked fantastic in preseason, and he even looked fantastic in this game, but then the touches just kind of went down for him in this game. Thibault was nowhere to be seen. Mm-hmm. I don't know where they're going to get help, and I think they're at a point now to where if you're sitting on Tobias Harris, depending on where you took him in your drafts, maybe in your best interest to move him, because I think he's kind of past his prime. Look for Philly to move him. I'd be shocked if they don't move him. This team, I just feel like it's going to look different by the trading deadline. Boston, I was definitely impressed because I was concerned on how much the shoulders of Jaylen Brown and Tatum were going to be able to take until Robert Williams is back. I didn't know anything about their new coach, and it's escaping my...
Joe Mazzulla.
Joe Mazzulla. I tell you what, a couple guys were joking about it, but I noticed it before I even saw it on Twitter. That guy chews gum like no one I've ever seen in my life. I mean, he is killing that gum. He had to have gone through like 40 packs of Bubblicious because I've never seen anybody chew the way he does.
Okay, now stop there. Stop there. Okay. How do you know it was Bubblicious?
It had to be.
He wasn't blowing bubbles on the sideline. It could have been Dentyne. It could have been Trident.
No way.
You can't
it had
just
to
say
dense.
it's Bubblicious.
It would have had to have been a dense gum.
No. Look, I think that we both know our stuff when it comes to basketball, but there is no way you can look at a man chewing gum and be able to tell what brand it was. There's no way.
As hard as he was chewing, it would have had to have been a dense gum.
Yeah.
Like
you know what it
Bazooka
could
Joe?
be? You know what it could be? Fruit Stripe.
Do they make that anymore?
Oh yeah, you can find it, but it's only at like sewing stores and stuff. It's probably been on the shelf for like 3 years. I agree with you on that front. The thing about Harden, all this talk about him being slimmer, is definitely true. You know, I don't know if I want to get on his workout plan in terms of how he is working on his basketball game, but clearly his weight loss plan is working for him. He looks trim. He looks athletic. He looks like Arizona State James Harden. That was really evident to me. So he is definitely taking that part of his game seriously. The problem that I have with that Sixers team, you know, just I always look at things just from a coaching perspective, just because that's my world. They stopped moving the ball in the second half, and I thought Legler said it best yesterday. And I like Legs. I think he has a pretty keen eye for things. He has a keen eye for a tanning bed for sure, but I think he has a keen eye for a lot of things in the NBA. And he said, until the Sixers realize that Tyrese Maxey is their second best player, they're just not going to be very good. And I thought that was really evident because the second half, the ball just stopped moving. And it got what we would say in the coaching profession is it got sticky, and it got really sticky, and it just turned into James Harden, you know, shakedown threes and shakedown bricks, and it just stopped. And Maxey just didn't get a sniff in the second half, so that needs to be fixed. And it's not going to be fixed really by coaching; it's going to be fixed by Harden just saying, you know what, I'm at this point in my career where I'm not Batman, maybe I'm not even Robin. I'm like, what's the is it Batboy, or who's the youngest? Is Batwing? Maybe that's who he is. Okay, until he really accepts that, I don't think that they're gonna really reach their full potential because Maxey's a stud. Maxey is a really, really good player, and I think that his numbers from a fantasy perspective should be good this year, but they should even actually be better. In terms of the second game too, I'm with you. I think the Lakers are in for a long haul. And I know we've talked about this a ton with Anthony Davis and the others. I don't know how this thing is going to look because now, granted, Golden State is really good. You know, they should be, you know, favored to win the championship again. But the Lakers really looked like a team that was it's almost like they just accepted the beatdown. It was odd to me. It was really odd.
Well, there were stretches where, and so I took LeBron in my fantasy draft, and because I got him on the flip in the second round, and I thought, well, I can't sit on him. I think that the way the team's constructed, and even after game one, LeBron saying we're just not built with enough shooters. He single-handedly brought them to within 8, I think, late in the third quarter. So as good as Golden State was playing, shortly after that, Andrew Wiggins just hits 3 threes in a row, and it was just like, okay, it's over. From a statistical standpoint, from fantasy, Davis had a big night. LeBron had a big night. Obviously, Steph had a big night. But Russell Westbrook in 9-cat leagues, I'm telling you, like it doesn't matter what he does on the court. From a fantasy perspective, there's still value there. So, from a actual live perspective, I don't think that Buddy Hield and Miles Turner solve the problem that they have in Los Angeles. They just don't have enough shooters, period.
No, they don't. I think I saw last night they were 10 for 45 outside the paint, 10 for 40 from 3. That, for an NBA franchise, that's atrocious. It really is. And, you know, I feel for Westbrook. I mean, think of him however you might, but I also like I look at him and I think this is a Hall of Fame caliber player. This is a player who has done some really amazing things in the league. Maybe even just statistically, and from a fantasy perspective, we remember those years where he was absolutely untouchable. He doesn't fit. He just doesn't fit that team and doesn't fit that roster, and everybody's blaming Westbrook for it. Well, it's not necessarily all his fault. He just doesn't work with them. He's a penetrator. That's what he does. He's not a spot up shooter. And they've got guys who clog up the paint. He can't find lanes. I think that it's just one of those situations where almost like what the Knicks would want to do, where they put together 2 or 3 stars and just think, well, they're talented enough to make it work. Well, it doesn't work because they haven't filled out the rest of their roster with what they need, and that's guys who can put the ball in the basket. They have nobody who can spin it. They don't have anybody who could spin it. And I'll tell you what, like if I'm Jeannie Buss or the Lakers, I'm on the phone. Like hey, JJ Redick, are you interested in coming back and coming off the bench? Like there are guys that you could call who would really help this team out. And I agree with you. If they make this deal, and I know Adrian Wojnarowski came out today and saying if the Lakers are willing to give up their 2027 and 2029 first round draft picks, along with Westbrook's expiring contract, they'll get Miles Turner and Buddy Hield back from Indiana. And I think that's fine. But the reason why the Lakers are not doing that is because I think they realize that just having Buddy Hield and Miles Turner isn't going to solve their problems. It's not going to solve it for them. They're going to be okay, but what is that going to do? Take them from a 6th seed in the West to the 5th? And when you're looking ahead 4, 5, 6, 7 years down the road with these first round picks, they have gutted their draft picks. So if I'm Indiana, I'm like, hey, a 2027 first rounder from a team that's unprotected that could be really, really struggling at that point, yeah, I'll go for that. So I don't see it happening. Yeah, maybe the Lakers get desperate and want to do that, but I don't know that they will. But if the Lakers, as they're currently constructed, this is going to be a hot mess all season.
Well, and the last thing before we move on to the next section, other surprises. I don't think anybody saw Utah coming out of the gate versus Denver. At halftime of that game, they were up by 22 points. So for all those people who thought Utah was going to be in tank mode, Utah put up 75 points in the first half against Denver. So it's one of those things where in the race to the bottom, oh, and by the way, the Minnesota Timberwolves that we talked about, having OKC 3 times in the first 2 weeks, that was a game that went to the crunch, down to the wire in crunch time all the way in the fourth quarter. So, I mean, I'm excited because I initially thought this was going to be just roll out your dead for some of these guys at the bottom, and it didn't end up being that way. So I'm blindly optimistic. I mean, even the Hornets, for Pete's sakes, they put up 129 points against the Spurs. So we both knew that was going to be probably 1 and 2 in the bottom of the league this season, Charlotte and San Antonio. But I mean, you're putting up 129 points. If this is what tanking looks like, I'm even excited for the lower half of the league because this is unreal. I mean, you had, the Grizzlies beating the Knicks in overtime. I don't think anybody thought that was going to be close. I don't know. I'm just excited. It's going to be a good season. But let's move on to the extensions.
Yeah, for sure. And I do think that just before we move forward too far, let's just reel this back a little bit. And just from a fantasy perspective, tanking does not hurt fantasy. In fact, it helps it. It really does. And I think that this is what makes things really, really fun to play fantasy basketball. It makes it so much fun because if you study up, if you do your homework, and Frank, I'll just plug our show. If you listen to the show, I think we're going to be able to really lead you down a path to success. A lot of these guys who you may not have really heard of are going to get some serious run towards the end of the season if these teams do tank. And I've seen it now in multiple spots. And we're in this thing 2 days where they're already separating the teams that want to win and the teams that don't. They really do think that Victor Wembanyama is that good. I heard him today, like Woj today said that he is the single greatest draft prospect possibly ever. Now let that soak in. Now, is that hyperbole? Probably. But you have a serious blue chipper here, and he's not the only one in the draft. So I think if some of these teams get off to some slow starts, it's going to be a little bit of a mess, and you're going to see some guys put up some numbers. That's going to be really fun for sure. So that back half of your roster, we're going to be able to churn through that and help you out all through the year. So let's move on from the opening night's festivities. Let's take a look at the extension deadline. There were some contracts doled out. I know you and I have talked about this a little bit. Golden State, they just don't care. Like they will spend whatever they have to, and it just doesn't matter. So, two pretty serious contracts came out. Jordan Poole, 4 years, 140 mil. That's a nice little chunk of change. I'm telling you right now, I would stand at that baseline and take a punch from Draymond for 4 years and $140 million. I mean, I'll take it. I'll take it. I'll probably turn my head a little bit, but I'll take it for 4 years and 140
Don't open up that wound with me.
I'm not going.
Let's just move past
Don't
it.
tell me. Okay, don't tell me you wouldn't take that punch for 4 years and 140 million.
I'd take a punch from Mike Tyson in his prime for $140 million.
I'd probably chop off my hand. Would you chop off your hand for 140? I'd chop off my hand.
I'll tell you what I wouldn't do. I wouldn't wrestle a grizzly bear like those two kids in Wyoming or Wisconsin or whatever it was. Did you see that?
Yeah. No, I did not.
Oh,
They
yeah,
wrestled a grizzly.
these two kids were hunting. I think they were elk hunting. And they came across a grizzly bear, which is kind of a freak thing. And the grizzly bear attacked him, and it attacked one of the guys. They're both wrestlers in college. And it was going at his scalp and like crunched his arm. He said, I could hear the bear's teeth hitting my skull and then it breaking the bone in my arm. His friend jumped on the back of the grizzly bear and started wrestling it and ripping at its ears and its eyes in order to get him off his friend. It's absolutely unbelievable. If you get a chance, go on the internet, check out the photos of this guy's head. Unreal. I tell you what, I wouldn't do that for $140 million. But I'd definitely take a punch from Draymond Green.
Yeah, and James, you and I go way back, but if a grizzly bear jumps on you, I'm out. Like, I think I'm probably just out. Like, I'm probably just, like, running like the wind. I mean, we'll cover it, I'm sure, in another show, but I got jumped once in Las Vegas, and, like, I always thought that somehow, because I'm not much of a scrapper, I always thought that somehow deep down I had like these mystical kung fu powers, because I've watched a lot of The Karate Kid, and it turns out that you really don't. Like you don't have that. And the thing is too, like everybody's seen the crane technique. Like you can't even try to use it and surprise anybody. It doesn't work. But anyway, no. Speaking of the Grizzlies, let's talk about other contracts.
Well, well, real quick, if Draymond picks up his option at the end of the season, their luxury tax bill will be $309 million.
Well, because that counts. Like Andrew Wiggins said, 4 years, $109 million.
Yeah, it's unreal.
Yeah, it really is. I mean that is a crazy, crazy number. But again, if you're competitive and you have this window, and those of us who aren't, 13, 14 years old, we remember the skinny years in Golden State when they weren't very good. The Robert Parrish seasons. I mean, there were times where they were not good, and they had a little stretch with Run TMC, with Hardaway and Mullen and Richmond, and even Sarunas Marciulionis, where they were competitive. But this Golden State Warriors team has not been, the talk of the town forever. So they're certainly doing their best to try to hang on. A couple other things here, like from a contract perspective too, that really do impact fantasy basketball. Brandon Clark, 4 years, $52 million. I agree with you. I think it's a good signing for a guy with pretty big value. I saw him in person at Gonzaga, and this guy, he is freakishly athletic, and I think he has a lot more potential than what the Grizzlies have shown. So your thoughts kind of on Brandon Clark?
If Triple J continues to be like a liability from an injury perspective, Brandon Clark, I think, is their best defensive player. I think that he fits a role. He doesn't need the ball. He's great offensive rebound and defensive rebound. So for $52 million to get a guy who's healthy, serviceable, plays well in that system, I think that's a steal.
Yeah. Kevin Porter Jr. also signed Rockets, 4 years, $82.5 million. That's pretty strong. And I think that really does make him a guy that they're really trying to build around. Now, Houston is likely not going to be very good again this season, but they're looking further than just this year. So your thoughts on Kevin Porter Jr. kind of long-term with the Rockets?
$82.5 million, but his contract is laden with a ton of It's just structured to where you have to earn it. So it's not guaranteed money. I believe only 15 million is guaranteed. So that was an odd one for him to sign. He's definitely banking on himself, and if he succeeds or exceeds his expectations, then he's definitely worth every penny of 82.5. I love KBJ, so I'm good with the figure. I'm just shocked that he signed it with that many conditions in it.
Yeah, there was another signing too that you kind of raised an eyebrow about. It's a 4-year, $28 million contract for a player who maybe isn't really betting on himself.
Yeah, Nasir Little in Portland, 4 years, 28 million. That's 7 million a season. If he's going to be your starting small forward, I was talking to you about this. He looks fantastic. I mean, from a body size perspective on what Portland needs, he's extremely athletic, long. It's just defensively that team is just horrible team defense. Individually, Nasir's pretty good. I'm not signing a contract for $7 million a season unless I just don't care about cash, because I would have to imagine that at his length, his size, his athleticism, that he could net, 9.5 to 11 someplace else. So this was a shock to me. I don't know if there's some backdoor deal with Dame or anything like that, but for Portland to get a starting small forward at $7 million a season, I mean, you can't beat that with a stick.
No, that seemed like a bit of a bargain deal for sure. There was another one too that I was pretty, I wouldn't say stunned, maybe I'd say surprised. I certainly raised an eyebrow. 4 years, $95 million for DeAndre Hunter with the Atlanta Hawks. That really is some serious coin for a guy playing with John Collins, and Collins has been a guy who has been on the block before. Certainly signed on longer term not too long ago. You just wonder, I mean, it just seems odd for them to be paying both of them the kind of money they're paying them. So from a fantasy perspective, are you thinking buy up shares of DeAndre Hunter, sell shares of John Collins? What are you thinking, James?
Yeah, this one I don't quite understand. I'm definitely from a fantasy or real life. I mean, 13.4 points, 3.3 rebounds, 1.3 assists, 0.7 steals, 0.4 blocks. He shoots 44% from the field, just under 38% from behind the arc. That is not $95 million for 4 years. I would have let him walk. They gave Collins a contract last season, so it might be that they're trying to figure out how this experiment with the two guards in the backcourt, Dejounte Murray and Trey, works out, and then they might have some flexibility before the trade deadline. I don't know, but I'd be shocked if Collins and Hunter are both on the roster with those types of contracts, because you're going to need to shore up. Clint Capella looked horrible in their first game. I mean, I would slate him in for probably like 9-9 this season. Okongu's just good. He's got to take that starting center spot. That's just a lot of money for DeAndre Hunter for little productivity. I mean, to be honest, just to compare, Nasir Little should be putting up those stat lines this season for Portland. So 28 million, 95 million. I'll take Nasir Little for 28 million.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you there for sure. So some injuries are out there already that are going to impact some fantasy teams. So, and two teams really got hit hard already. The Bucks. So Pat Connaughton, he's out for 3 weeks or so with a right calf strain. Connaughton is one of those spark plug guys, man. He really does produce whenever he's on the court. And Chris Middleton, still expected to miss the first few weeks of the regular season. Keeps on rehabbing from that wrist surgery. So what do you think that means for the Bucks kind of moving forward here, at least for the next 3 or 4 weeks?
Well, if you have Giannis, obviously he's going to get the lion's share of all the stats. He was going to do that anyway, but Connaughton, Middleton, which I don't know. I thought Middleton was going to be back when the season started, so I was kind of shocked by the fact that he still was 1 to 2 weeks out. So when I'm looking at their roster, and remember Joe Ingles is still sitting, but he's not going to be back till after the first part of the year. So there's going to be a lot on the shoulders of Giannis right out of the gate. I still think they're going to be fine. As far as the East and how it shakes up, it is heavy in the top, but there isn't a scenario in which Milwaukee, finds themselves to where they're clawing and scratching before the All-Star break. So This won't hurt them overall. What I don't want is I don't want to see Giannis end up kind of getting burnt out. But the good thing about Giannis, statistically speaking, is he does a lot of damage in very few minutes. And historically, he averages about 31 minutes a game. So it's not like he's a heavy, heavy minutes guy anyway. So I think they're going to be fine. Connaughton, if you have him on your roster, you're probably in a 13, 14, 15 man league, team league, sorry. And I don't see, anybody picking him off the wire or keeping him on the injured list. Middleton, I could see people being disappointed week 1 and week 2, thinking he was going to be back. That's a bigger stat loss because he's still got top 100 value from a fantasy perspective.
So the other team that really got hit a little bit, the Lakers. So Dennis Schroeder, he's going to undergo surgery on his injured thumb. He's got some ligament damage there. He's going to miss 3 to 4 weeks. And then Thomas Bryant, also surgery in left thumb. He's going to be reevaluated in about 3 weeks. And as a result, Anthony Davis is playing the 5. I'll give it to Darvin Ham. Darvin Ham is not messing around. He just went to Anthony Davis and said, you know what? I don't care what you think. You're playing the 5. That's just the way that it is. So, and I really think that's the way that somebody had to handle the Lakers. So, what do you think that's going to do here moving forward? I mean, we've already seen him once, but how do these injuries really affect the Lakers from a fantasy performance?
Well, what you had just touched on is like the biggest piece. So the implosion of the Lakers, these 2 injuries specifically, they may not have fantasy repercussions, but they definitely have team repercussions because Schroeder would have been kind of that go-between that would have allowed the Lakers to kind of push Russell to the bench and come in the second unit. So with him out, you can't afford to do that. So they could have used the excuse that Schroeder's going to be our starter. Thomas Bryant being injured, he was going to be their starting center, even though he's not necessarily a viable starting center. They just needed a warm body out there, which would have allowed Davis to play the 4. He said it a million times over. He doesn't want to be a 5. You're right. Ham says you don't have a choice. You're going to play the 5. So you're already right out of the gate kind of pissing off, your best player. So it's more the ramifications of the move. So now you have Russell Westbrook in your starting lineup. Nobody wants that. You got Anthony Davis playing the 5. Nobody wants that. So those 2 injuries may not mean anything. They mean a lot to the Lakers. From a statistical standpoint, if Anthony Davis is at the 5, Thomas Bryant's probably going to get you like 6 and 9 a game, shoot a high percentage. He's not going to hurt you as far as anything else, but he's not anybody that I'm looking at off the wire. But I do think it affects, and also the propensity for injury for Anthony Davis with him banging down low. So he looked fantastic in game 1, but we'll see how that shakes out.
So one other one that's notable, Zach LaVine, they're saying left knee management, which is really surprising because we heard nothing about LaVine needing really anything in the offseason. So what are your thoughts on the smoke coming out of Chicago?
This one just gets under my skin because I drafted LaVine and there was really nothing. This is going to be something to watch all season because when you're starting off not playing your first game because of management issues, that's a red flag to me. If they start slipping in Chicago with Lonzo out, if DeRozan sees a regression, which would make sense because he played out of his mind last season, they start doing something like this where LaVine's sitting on back-to-backs, they find themselves in the 10 spot, 3-4 weeks into the season. I'm going to go ahead and say that I see Chicago being a seller before the trading deadline, looking to move DeRozan. He's a good fit in what the Lakers are trying to do. He's not a 3-point shooter, but he's wanted to be in LA this entire time. I could see a package where you ship, I don't know where Lonzo fits in this whole thing, but potentially Russell Westbrook, those contracts, you could do something with DeRozan. And I could also see Vucevic leaving Chicago and then just going to full tank mode. So watch for Vuce later in the season because there's definitely a ton of teams that would want a guy like him. Statistically speaking, if you put him anywhere, I don't see his stat line dropping. And depending on where he ends up getting traded to, you might actually see it peak up a little bit. So this could have ramifications. And Zach LaVine, you're talking top 20. I took him with my 3rd pick, and this one's a real shot in the gut. So now you're talking, top 40 value, and he's sitting, and we're already talking load management game 1. So that's just frustrating for owners that have LaVine who had high hopes from having a big season.
Yeah, for sure. So would you consider the Bulls roster a bit of a candle in the wind?
No, they're more like Allentown.
Okay. Well,
Yeah.
because I'm just saying, from Bulls fans' perspective, they're probably saying, "Don't go breaking my heart." That's what they're saying right now.
They're going
So,
to be looking for an uptown girl when it's all said and done.
well, they might. We'll see. But don't let the sun go down on them yet, there, James. Okay, because there could be brighter days ahead for sure. How about a notable return? There is a notable return. Somebody who, we certainly have high hopes for this year to build upon a decent rookie season, and that's Jalen Suggs.
His timeline initially, when we talked last week or the week before, is that it was 3 weeks. And then Cole Anthony couldn't go. And then next thing you know, oh, well, Jalen Suggs is getting the start in opening night against Detroit. And I'm thinking, well, there was no update whatsoever as far as his status. So he goes out, puts up 21 points as a rebound, 3 assists, goes 8-11 from the field and 4 of 6 from three. So if you slept on Jalen Suggs, if for whatever reason he was sitting, you got him late in draft, evidently he's doing fine. So, kudos to Orlando for not updating their injury report and kind of throwing everybody for a loop. If you didn't play him game one, I'm sorry about that because you probably left quite a bit of points on the table.
Certainly did. Okay, so let's talk about the schedule for next week. There is one team with just 2 games, and that's going to be Sacramento. So certainly now, I think this needs to be disclosed. Like when there's a team that only has a couple of games, typically an NBA team is going to have 3 games a week. All right, so Sacramento has 2 games. We're not telling you, hey, trade De'Aaron Fox, trade.
Do not trade Sabonis.
Domantas Sabonis. There's no reason to do that, but you need to be aware that they're only going to play twice in the week. So you need to make sure that that back end of your roster is good.
Social media all week. So we're on Facebook. I go into the forums. People are asking questions all the time. And they're like, should I move Sabonis for this? Should I move Sabonis for this? I got offered this for Sabonis. If you're shopping Domantas Sabonis, just stop playing fantasy. The guy is going to be a fantasy stat. I mean, he's fantastic. He's a double-double machine, shoots high percentages. He's got range, great passer. Percentages on all 3 levels. Do not be moving Sabonis just because he's got a 2-game week and you lost week 1. Just stop that noise.
Yeah, boy, you're feeling the love tonight. I like it. So let's talk about teams with 4 games, and there's a whole host of them. So Brooklyn, Chicago, Dallas, Denver, Detroit, Golden State, Houston. If you have any Rocket Man, you probably should play him. Indiana, Miami, Minnesota, New York, Orlando, Philadelphia, San Antonio, and Utah. So obviously a busy week in the association. So to me, of course, you know where I'm going to gravitate in terms of, grabbing some guys off the wire. It's going to be some of those baby Warriors. When you look at what they did in the first night, really limiting Clay's minutes, I think there's going to be some value had there. So if you want to pick up one of those guys for the back end of your roster to play him really 4 times in the week, I think that's a good team to go and poach from. So from those teams that stand out to you, what are you thinking?
I'm looking at rosters that have older veterans. So Miami, if you got Jimmy Butler or you got Kyle Lowry, chances are, you might get 2 solid nights, 1 good night, and then 1 off night from those guys. It's just father time. And unless you're LeBron, it's just tough to do 4 games in a week. So same thing with Brooklyn. Kevin Durant, I think Kyrie's going to be fresh. I mean, hell, he only played like 1/8 of the season last year, but look for Durant to have 2 solid games. Here's my mindset on 4-game weeks for stars. I look for 2 really good games, a good game, and then a subpar game. Dallas, I'm curious to see how the workload is going to be with Luka. He's got to have such a high usage rate to see him kind of peter out later in the week. And as far as this group of teams and who would be resting on back-to-backs, I really don't see a scenario in which anybody's going to be doing that just yet early in the season. So just a little bit older stars, Jimmy Butler, Kyle Lowry, they kind of come front of mind to maybe watch them. And if you could pick somebody up off the bench, who we're going to talk about here in our sleeper picks from Miami here shortly.
Very good. So one of the cool things for us is we have a sponsor now. Like, it didn't take very long. It's only like day 2 of the NBA season, and we have ourselves a sponsor. So, James, a word from our sponsor, perhaps?
Yeah, this episode is brought to you by Fantasia Sports App, the #1 blockchain-powered peer-to-peer fantasy sports app to play fantasy football, baseball, basketball, and more. And with the Fantasia Sports app, if you deposit $5 today, you'll receive entry to a contest where you could win hundreds of dollars. On top of each contest's prize pool money, Fantasia is also giving away some unique additional prizes like exclusive NFTs, official sports memorabilia, tickets to games, and much more. NFL star running back Aaron Jones and Celtics point guard Peyton Pritchard from the Northwest have already made the switch, so what are you waiting for? Join Fantasia right now for weekly NFL, NBA, MLB, and EPL contests. We will have a link to the Fantasia app in the description. Make sure you mention the Fantasy Basketball Podcast.
Love it. So, yeah, I think Aaron Jones is probably already looking ahead to the future now. So, A.J. Dillon is like right on his heels, so he's already looking ahead. So, no, and we personally know one of the guys involved in that company. Really, really solid guy. And just from my days at DLF, we really don't support any company out there that we wouldn't use ourselves. So, really cool stuff going on there at Fantasia Sports. So, there's some stuff to watch here moving forward. Let's just kind of take these one at a time here. So Minnesota really does have a cake schedule. The Spurs 3 times and the Lakers. So if you have Anthony Edwards, Rudy Gobert, Karl Anthony Towns, anybody on the Wolves, like this is like you're going to rake over the next week or so. So what are some other things that stood out to you that you kind of noted for things to watch over the next week, James?
You got Colin Sexton in Utah. Like I said, I'm high on him. I took him in my fantasy draft. I think, in 2021, before he was injured last season, averaged 24.3 points, 3 rebounds, 4.4 assists, 1 steal. Great fantasy value. He's got to have an absolute green light in Utah with no leash. Utah really put the hurt on Denver in their opening game. Minnesota, on paper, they look fantastic. Let's see how it translates statistically, fantasy perspective. I think all 3 of those guys are going to be fantastic. I had Cole Anthony down as somebody to watch. This was when I thought Jalen Suggs was going to be dealing with an injury. Probably going to scratch that. I still think Cole Anthony has value, but Suggs right out of the gate played fantastic. So maybe just kind of keep him in your back pocket as a player to watch. The Knicks, surprising. Everybody had Memphis as a top 4 seed in the West. I'm not one who feels that way. I'm a big Pelican guy this year, but the Knicks looked really, really good against Memphis. And Julius Randle, I think this upcoming week they play Orlando, Charlotte, Milwaukee, and Cleveland. Again, we kind of talked about Milwaukee being depleted. Orlando's front line, they're very, very long, but they're not a fantastic defensive squad. I think they're going to have a little bit of trouble against Cleveland, but last year, Randall, 20.1 points, 9.9 rebounds, so right on that double-double cusp if you have a multiplier in your league. 5 assists, just under 1 steal. So, the addition of Brunson, I'm excited to see, how much that takes off of him as far as responsibility to bring the ball. In that Memphis game, he put up 24 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists, had a good percentage. Kyrie Irving. There was a joke about if Kyrie was trying to get to the Lakers, opening night versus New Orleans was a good start because it just didn't turn out how he would have liked. But having said that, I still think from a statistical standpoint, Kyrie does everything so effortlessly. He still had 15 points, 2 rebounds, 5 assists. Wasn't a great shooting night, but look for him to rebound. They've got Memphis.
I think wasn't he 6 of 19?
Yeah, 6 of 19. He was 0 of 6 from 3. Again, he's one of those guys that he could have a night like that and then just put up 55, in the next night. He's got Memphis, Milwaukee, Dallas, and Indiana next week. And that's really, kind of the key players before we get into our sleepers. Is there anybody else that you're kind of keeping an eye on?
Well, just kind of combing through some of the scores from the first couple nights, I think there are just some things that stand out to me just from a fantasy perspective. We talk about Banchero a little bit, 27 points, 9 rebounds, 5 assists. I thought the guy was going to be a stud coming out, but 27, 9, and 5 on opening night, that's more than what I would have ever expected from him. We've talked a lot about Tyrese Halliburton. I know that you and I both really, really love him, and he showed up on night one, 26 points, 4 rebounds, 7 assists, solid. The DeJounte Murray, Trae Young dynamic, I think, is interesting for sure. How are those guys going to coexist? So far, so good. Young had 23 points, 13 assists. DeJounte Murray, 20 points, 11 assists. Hey, if they can put that up every night, fantasy managers are going to be more than happy for sure. So they were definitely able to coexist at least for one night. So that kind of stood out to me. We talked a little bit about Julius Randle. Solid start, 24 points, 11 rebounds, 6 assists. Not bad. I know your guy,
Josh Giddey.
SGA. That's where I was going. 32 points, 6 rebounds, 5 assists. Rudy Gobert. I was surprised. Were you surprised at the point line? 16 rebounds. Okay, you could see that, but 23 points.
Yeah,
23 points on opening night.
I think it's when you stretch the floor with your 4, which they didn't have in Utah. I think those easy putback buckets, they're going to be shooting a ton of threes, and Rudy's a great offensive rebounder. So I definitely see the potential for him having big nights. I don't think it's going to be sustainable. It's not like they're going to go back to the basket to him. But if he's comfortable playing dirty ball, yeah, he could scoop up just a ton and quick putbacks. He's a decent foul shooter, so he has value. Like I said, I thought his drop-off was going to be less than what Towns' drop-off was going to be. So,
well, after one night, it's not. Now, granted, you're talking about the smallest of sample sizes in the world, but Towns moving to the 4, and I know he wanted to. First night, again, a lot of those things we've talked about over the last couple of weeks. He's 2 of 10 from the field, 2 for 7 from 3. Tied for the team lead in number of 3-pointers taken with 7. He made 2. Anthony Edwards made 1. 6 rebounds. Gobert gobbled up those rebounds again. Towns was tied for 3rd on the team with, 3 other guys with 6. 12 points on opening night. Not what you would have hoped for from a guy who you probably took, realistically late in the first round. Now, again, is this time to panic and say, oh my gosh, Towns is going to be terrible, let's just get rid of... No, it's not. It's, again, a very tiny sample size. It's not time to panic on any of these guys. But some of those things that we've talked about, some of those concerns that we've had, early on at least, are coming to fruition. So that is something to watch over the next, I would say, couple of weeks for sure. Outside of that, I thought that Jaden Ivey was impressive. First game out of the chute, 19 points, 4 assists, 3 steals, 3 rebounds.
Defensively, he was
32 minutes.
everywhere. Yeah, defensively, he was everywhere. Yeah. And I think he's going to be a real problem. And Cade's gotten so long. He reminds me of Andre Miller. But if Ivey's playing like a Energizer Bunny, and then you've got Cade playing that slow, methodical pace, I don't know. Detroit's just going to be fun to watch. I don't think they're going to do anything this season, but they've got the makings. Bogdanovich looked fantastic in his debut. So Ivey's going to be fun to watch.
Yeah, he certainly is. And again, like this show isn't about us trying to go back and say, oh, we were right here and right here. That's not what this is about at all. But I will say this. Our concerns about the Phoenix Suns are real. And I think those are starting very early to show up. I think there is some trouble in the desert that's brewing, and they need to get this thing turned around really, really quickly. And if they don't, there is going to be a problem in Phoenix. They don't look the same. They just do not look the same.
Luka owns Phoenix. Let's just get that right out. Luka is a bad man, and the Suns don't want any part of him.
Yep. And the only thing I'll add to, we talked about new places and new faces, or new faces and new places, I should say. I don't think a place has a new face. Donovan Mitchell, 31 points in his Cleveland debut. He's a stud.
Scary moment for Darius Garland. He got popped in the face, an eye injury. He was down. They didn't know if it was a concussion or what, but he was down for a few minutes, and they took him back. He didn't play the second half. I haven't heard anything yet as of us recording this, but it was a scary moment there for a little bit.
Yeah. Now, was he punched by Jalen or by Draymond Green?
No.
Like, did Draymond Green like make a trip out there and punch him in the face?
Yeah, he's just throwing them bones.
Just throwing haymakers wherever, just like the WWE. It's just whatever city shows up on the calendar. I'm just gonna show up and hit somebody in the face. So no, scary moment for sure. So we have a couple of sleepers. I know that you have a couple specifically that you wanted to talk about. So go ahead, James. Who are your sleepers here coming up?
We got Miami next week with 4 games, and I was talking about Jimmy Butler and Kyle Lowry. Nikola Jovic, this kid, he's 6'10", fantastic range. In the Adriatic League, averaged just under 12 points, 5.5 rebounds, 1 assist. This kid has all the makings of being a very, very special. He can, fantastic ball handling, can pull up from literally anywhere, good body size. I think he's got to work himself into that rotation, and he's got to do it really, really quickly. I like his range. I like what he brings. He's got a toughness. Watch for him. He's sitting on a lot of wires. He's owned by 1% of rosters right now. Me saying this, I'm probably going to pick him up because I know my league listens to this podcast, so they're probably going to snag him. But look for him to have an increasing role. And then from
and the ABA Adriatic League.
I'm just saying.
I think that, isn't that where I think that's where the semi-pro Flint Tropics were from. Is that where Jackie Moon played? I think it was the ABA Adriatic League, Jackie Moon and company. So we talk about wrestling a bear. Jackie Moon had the bear that night. Everything's coming together. Everything is just coming together for this show, James. I think that the most value you could have with having Nikola Jovic is you could take him and try to trade him for like Luka Doncic or something, and try to trick somebody into thinking that they have Nikola Jokic. So if you can do that and just, disguise that one letter, you might be able to win your league.
Well, if you're there's a lot, like I'm in a 14-team league and he's owned by 1% of owners. And I'm sitting there thinking there's definite value there if you're confident with the rest of your roster. I think he's going to slowly play his way into steady minutes in this. It's just a hunch that I have. I'm just putting that out there. It may pan out. It may not. That's something that I'm going to hedge towards. At 1%, how much risk I could drop him at any point. My second sleeper, Bol in Orlando. Look, multiple outlets have reported out of Orlando that Bol's their best shooter, period. And we're talking posts. We're talking backcourt.
Manute, during like the tail end of his career, he used to crank him from 3. And for those of you guys who have never seen Manute Bol, he's 7'7", legit 7'7".
Well, Bol, what is Bol, 7'5", 7'4"?
He's up there.
Yeah,
for sure.
He's
definitely taller than me.
Yeah. So he had 10 points, 6 rebounds, 1 block in just 17 minutes. So from a fantasy points per minute perspective, Bol is looked fantastic. He has all preseason. He doesn't need a ton of minutes. There's a lot of posts here. If Banchero ends up kind of playing that backcourt like he played today in Detroit, in that 2-3 position, look for Bol to get anywhere from 19 to 24 minutes a game. If he's still producing at that kind of fantasy points per minute in like week 2, he's only owned by 3% of teams in the fantasy leagues right now. So definitely look to snag Bol just from a fantasy points per minute, because if he sees an increased role, he could end up being big for you.
Well, so next week we'll probably look at sleepers, and you're going to probably have somebody like LeBron James, maybe Kevin Durant, Kyrie Irving, and then just try to pick up some random names out there. It's kind of like that old Key and Peele, the old Key and Peele football name thing with Bol and whatnot. So, yeah, I think that.
Did I tell you that I drafted Walker Kessler after our center position, or we were talking about breakthrough players?
I did not.
Yeah, I did take him late in my draft. I'm curious to see how he ends up panning out, because I took Jared Vanderbilt as well. But I actually was going to put him on this as a sleeper this week. I think I'm going to give him 2 more weeks, because I'm not worried about him getting scooped up off the wire with Kelly Olynyk there just yet.
Yep.
But I do think Kelly Olynyk's going to slowly work his way to the bench, and I just don't see a Zeller starting in this league for very long.
Yeah, it's just so early. You just don't know how this whole thing is going to shake out. But here's what we do know. we do know that we're going to have a couple shows a week. So make sure that you tune back in and check out our social media to see exactly when that show drops. We're going to be on this thing like crazy, as you guys can already tell. You know, we're super excited for the season. So make sure you do that. So I think that that's going to be it for us for tonight. So I would say for James and Ken, goodbye, Yellow Brick Road. We'll see you next time on the Fantasy Basketball Podcast.